No adversarial dynamic, no force to postulate against equals nothing to sharpen yourself against. What exists now is the simplicity of entertainments. It seems to be quite popular, and it's no wonder why. It's called degeneration or nihilism. It comes from the overindulgence in the animal mind, the limbic system. The old Egyptian myths referred to a celestial worm, a dragon or a demon of the darkness, calling it Apophis, the archetype that must be averted and fought against every day. Reading from the IEP website, nihilism is the belief that all values are baseless and that nothing can be known or communicated. It is often associated with extreme pessimism and radical skepticism that condemns existence. A true nihilist would believe in nothing, have no loyalties, and no purpose other than perhaps an impulse to destroy. While few philosophers would claim to be nihilists, nihilism is most often associated with Friedrich Nietzsche, who argued that its corrosive effects would eventually destroy all moral, religious, and metaphysical convictions and precipitate the greatest crisis in human history. And the 20th century nihilistic themes, epistemological failure, value destruction, and cosmic purposelessness have preoccupied artists, social critics, and philosophers. Mid-century, for example, the existentialists held popularized tenets of nihilism in their attempts to blunt its destructive potential. By the end of the century, existential despair, as a response to nihilism, gave way to an attitude of indifference, often associated with anti-foundationalism, end quote. Creature comforts, pleasures, equality, and overpositivity being repulsed by the elastic binary and inevitability of cause and effect. Nonetheless, still an immutable law in nature, one that cannot be escaped, the scales must correct at some point. Moving forward to today, this sort of devolution or de-evolution, tomato, moving backwards into the animal kingdom can clearly be seen quite visually and is widely promoted in variable Western societies. Currently, wink wink. This is where emotion and the involuntary processes of the default nature or default AI of the brainstem reign over the individual, not the individual in a position of control over their own emotional state. The defining features or traits are quite visible, even when subtly observed. Ingravescent, or becoming worse, the grave and gravity pulling them down, as stated before many times, compared and contrasted to or with the dendrites of plants, where their extremities are ascending upwards towards the heights, ever extending towards the light of the sun. Telemechanics comes to mind here, at least for me anyway. Chemical, biological, and mathematical processes being controlled by the higher mind. Physiology and emotion as a feedback loop. Obviously going in two very different directions. Physiology over emotion being the optimal path, but then in direct conflict with reckless violence and brutality of the primal drives. A repeating pattern that will eventually have to be eliminated by mastering the martial aspect of the visceral. The neocortex being stimulated by the challenge of war whether that be with the mostly extinct gore of prehistoric reptilian terrorism, or the modern degenerated, egocentric default version of man.